Hey, it's Crosscheck here, and this is my video response to New Age Gamer's video on the spiritual resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, I think he did a fairly thorough job of covering most of the biblical texts that the Jehovah's Witnesses will generally use in order to substantiate their claim that Jesus was risen as a spirit creature and not a physical person. And I also think that Shazulu has put up some excellent video responses to this, so I'm only going to touch on a couple points in the video. And let me play a clip from the video, and then I will give you my response to what New Age Gamer has said.
Request. So let's read in verse 26. It says, "Well, 8 days later, his disciples were again indoors, and Thomas with them. Jesus came, although the doors were locked, and he stood in their midst and said, 'May you have peace.'" Let's stop there for 1 second. Right here we see that the doors were locked when the disciples were gathered. There was no one else in the room but the disciples, and magically Jesus appeared there. How can Jesus do that if he had a body of flesh and bones?
Okay, so now one of the evidences that New Age Gamer puts forth is Jesus apparently walked into this room with the doors locked, and it was some kind of magic act that he was putting on. And I've always found this line of reasoning very peculiar, and generally I only hear it from Jehovah's Witnesses, where they say, well, he had a body of flesh and bone, and how could he enter through a locked door and this and that. Now, I would quickly remind them that this is the same Jesus who, with a body of flesh and bone, walked on water. That clearly violates the law of physics, just like walking into a room does. Jehovah's Witnesses seem to have a very low tolerance for the miraculous. Christ often broke the laws of physics by raising a dead person, or when he fed the multitudes, or all of his healings broke the law of physics. So I'm really not sure why Jehovah's Witnesses, or what it is about their particular theology that would have them not preclude these miracles in breaking the laws of physics here, but it would be utterly impossible for Jesus in his resurrected, glorified body to walk into a room without using the door. So let's see what else New Age Gamer has to say here.
Chapter 24. Let's read verse 15. It says, "Now as they were conversing and discussing, Jesus himself approached them and began walking with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him." That's an interesting text. Let's read verse 30 and 31. Jesus said to him, as he was reclining with them at the meal, and he took the loaf, blessed it, and broke it, and began to hand it to them. At that their eyes were fully open, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from them. So we see here that Jesus was with them, and he just magically disappeared. Obviously because he dematerialized his body, and he became a spirit and left from their presence. And also it says here that their eyes were that they recognized him, that their eyes could see, and it was only because that he was breaking the bread. He was doing something familiar that the disciples could pick up. If he was in the same body, they can easily recognize him. Like, it's the Lord, it's Jesus.
Alright, now what we just had there was New Age Gamer's interpretation of the incident on the road to Emmaus. And he said earlier in his video that all of his beliefs come from the Bible. Now, I've often been a critic of the Watchtower Association, that they introduce things that aren't in the Bible, and that they have a hard time keeping with the context of the passages that they actually use to try to prove their points. And the reason that I don't think that he completely kept to Scripture was Scripture not once ever says that Jesus materialized the body. This is a presupposition that they've come up with. And let me show you what I believe is their error in context. In biblical interpretation, there's a saying that says you translate the harder to understand text in light of the easier to understand text. And I actually think that this account is one of the easier to understand texts if you follow what's going on. Let me go to Luke 24:16, where it says, "But they were kept from recognizing him." Now these gentlemen were kept from recognizing Jesus Christ. So what was it that kept them? Was the thing that kept them from recognizing him the fact that he had a different body? Well, clearly nowhere in the text says that. Or was it something else that kept them from recognizing them? So let's go down to verse 30 and 31, where it says, "When he was at the table with them, he took bread, he gave thanks, he broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him." So the problem that they had in recognizing Jesus Christ didn't lie in the fact that he had a different materialized body. Clearly the text never ever says that. The problem was with the disciples' eyes. For one reason or another, God, in his sovereignty, decided to keep them from recognizing Jesus until he decided to open up their eyes and let them recognize him. So clearly, the assumption that he wasn't recognized because he was in a different materialized body is found nowhere in Scripture. And for anybody who's interested, I previously made a video called Jesus Copperfield that you can find in my channel, where I talk about the incident with Thomas and how he wanted to see, his specific request was to see the wounds that came from the cross or torture stake, and how if he wasn't shown those specific wounds, Jesus was actually deceiving Thomas. And I think also Shazulu's videos on the resurrection are an excellent resource, and I look forward to any answers from newagegamer or any other Jehovah's Witness out there who would like to challenge me or point out any error in what I've said here. Thank you for listening.